Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How are you going, Sarah?
I'm pretty good. How about you today?
Yeah, good.
That's good.
It's nice to have a almost spring morning. It's
Almost.
still a little bit cold. My fingers are still somewhat frozen, but that's all right. We'll get through it.
Still have our jackets on, so it's not too warm though.
And it's awesome being under this fantastic tree.
Absolutely
I have no
beautiful.
idea what tree this is. What is it? Is it an oak? Someone tell me what kind of tree this is.
Don't know.
Hey? Oak. It is an oak. Thank you. Thank you.
Fabulous.
It's great to see everyone, well, virtually anyway, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other in the flesh very soon. What's been happening this week? Anything exciting?
Oh, we've just been doing lots of cleaning at home. That's all about the most exciting thing here.
That is so boring. That is so boring. Look, while I just happen to be wandering around, right? You know, don't interrupt you. But look,
Sorry.
just to let you know, the hub where we would normally meet, because it's council facilities, they've got restrictions that we really can't meet there. So we're looking at a new venue. In fact, we're actually even negotiating at the moment for a good venue. But if you've got any ideas, suggestions, we're going to make some decisions this week. So we'll let you know before next weekend what's going on. But at the moment, we can't use the hub. And so I'm excited because it actually opens up a whole lot of other possibilities, right? And it's part of God's already got an answer before we even got to this place. So I'm really quite excited that as we step into this new part of Redgum's development, God's already got an answer. So, but if you've got one to pass on to us, go for it. You know any places, Sarah?
No, not yet.
You're useless. Just sing. You're good at singing. That'll do. Right,
Alexa,
I'll leave you to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear there's some birthdays today.
There is.
Well, no, not today, but from this week. So the Sharman Taylor family
Yep.
have had
Dave
an almost
in America.
an almost shared birthday too, because there's Dave.
Yeah,
And
don't confuse me with America time frame and dates and things. Just Asher, happy birthday for this week. Dave, happy birthday. You sting. Go on, just get on with it.
And also we do wish everyone else a happy birthday that happens to have had one today, this week, next week, the last 12 months or the next 12 months. So if we've missed you, we apologise, but we do our best. All right, let's sing, shall we?
Sounds good.
I cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears, he lay him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone. Messiah still and all alone. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days he will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. the secret of your presence, I know there I am restored. When you call, I won't refuse. Each new day again I'll choose. There is no one else for me, none but Jesus, crucified to set me free. Now I live to bring Him praise. In the chaos, in confusion, I know You're sovereign still. In the moment of my weakness, You give me strength to do Your will. When You call, I won't delay. This my song through all my days. There is no one else for me, none but Jesus, crucified to set me free. Now I live to bring Him praise. There is no one else for me, none but Jesus, crucified to set me free. Now I live to bring Him praise. Oh, my delight is in You, Lord. All of my hope, all of my strength. Oh, my delight is in You, Lord, forevermore. Oh, my delight is in You, Lord. All of my hope, all of my strength. Oh, my delight is in You, Lord, forevermore. There is no one else for me, none but Jesus, crucified to set me free. Now I live to bring Him praise. There is no one else for me, none but Jesus, crucified to touch of your hand, stronger each day. Show me your way. Show me your ways, that I may walk with you. Show me your ways. I put my hope in you. The cry of my heart is to love you more, to live with the touch of your hand, stronger each day. Show me your ways, stronger each day. Show me your ways, stronger each day. Show me your ways.
I think how it works is that you stop singing and play and I step up and do something. Is that how it works?
That's right. You pick up the cue that we're finishing.
Okay, right. Can you grab your bits and pieces off that, Dave, and I'll steal your little thing there. It's always dangerous if you let me near technology. So now that that's done, I feel so much safer. So thank you, Sarah.
Pleasure.
Yep. Good morning. Right now in your life, if you believe that God exists and that he's a God that is relational and that he wants you to get to know him, there's really only two ways you can do that. And the first way you can do that is looking backwards, looking at the past, looking at what God has done. Now, that might only be 5 minutes earlier, but it's still in the past. It's like right at the moment we're live streaming from Howard Park here. There's trees all around us. There's a river behind us. There's ecosystems that you can look at the creation that God has made and you can get to know him through this amazing mind behind putting all this together. How you can go microscopically, you can go expansively, and you can see the hand of God, what God has done in the past. You can even have stories of what Jesus has done in your life or what he's done in other people's lives. If you talk to Theo and Felicity, they'll tell you how God led them from South Africa 20 years ago to Australia. How that he organised in advance all the detail, the job that Theo would come to, the place that they'd live in. So much detail. They'd love to tell you of what God has done for them. Even Theo had these two big buff-headed dogs, these staffies that he was breeding, and he desperately needed a home for them, and God provided the right home for him. Stories of what God has done is a powerful thing. It's a way we can express what God's done. And at the moment, I've got a mozzie in this ear, and I'm going to kill the little sucker if it comes closer. So, now, you may have grown up in a Christian home. You may have even read the Bible or parts of the Bible many times. Or you may be not even sure what we're talking about, but you're curious. No matter where we are in this relationship with God, we all start in one place, and that's the things that God does. And it's a wonderful place to get to know God through what he does. But for many of us, we stay just at that, and we never move. We never go beyond that. The whole of our life is lived in just knowing God through what he does, and that's a problem. Yes, you're a Christian. Yes, you can tell us stories of what God has done, how he's healed you and saved you and changed your life. Like, you know that this relationship with God will continue through eternity. And that is fantastic. But if that's where you stay, the problem is that you actually become vulnerable to times when you start to doubt God, to even question God, to be angry at him, confused that he didn't do what you thought he would do in this moment, when you prayed and it never happened, and you don't understand why. Back in the garden, Adam and Eve only knew God through what he did, through the creation around them, and what he said, how he talked to them. But they were vulnerable because that's the limit of their knowledge of God. Adam even knew what it was like for God to make him a wife. He was so amazed at how gorgeous Eve was, how beautiful she was. He said to God, God, why have you made this just luscious looking woman for me? And God says, well, I've done that so that you would be attracted to her and you'd fall in love with her. And then Adam had a thought. He said, well, God, I appreciate that, but she's not really that smart. Like, she's a bit ditzy. Like, why didn't you make her a bit brighter? And God explained to Adam, that's so that she would fall in love with you, right? Now, Eve's IQ was not the reason that she chose to walk away from God, to do her own thing. It wasn't because she was the weaker sex. When I hear dumb, stupid men say things like that, I just want to bop them on the head, right? The whole reason that Adam and Eve were so vulnerable, not to be conned into eating an apple, but to be conned into questioning God's character, doubting God's character, and as a result of that, rebelling against him. The reason they were so vulnerable, because they only knew him through what he did, what he said, how he talked about his will for them. And Eve, she was even more susceptible because she didn't hear firsthand from God not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. She only heard that through Adam. It was secondhand. Part of her experience with God was secondhand. And if you only know God through what he does or through secondhand things that people tell you about him, and it's not personal revelation, it sets you up to be susceptible to getting angry at times, to doubting God, to be confused over circumstances. This week, I got a text from somebody. It was a conversation that we're having via text. And they asked this question, and this was the question they asked me. Does God still care? And he was meaning about him. Does God still care about him because there was so much going on in his life? And I replied, this is the text message, I replied back, I said, absolutely. He created you. He dreamed you into existence. And then they said this to me. All he's doing is sitting by and watching all my pain. God is so far away, he doesn't hear me anymore. Now, that's because this person only knows God through what he does. He's doubting God's character. He's doubting if God will even hear him, because the only lens he has to look through is this lens of his circumstances. And the circumstances are really desperate. They're difficult. And he feels like God has abandoned him. It's possible to read the Bible and to miss the emotion that is in some of the words that are just black words on white paper, and they're just words. See, the Bible is not written like a novel. It's a documentary in a sense. It's a account of what's happened. And if we miss the emotion, we can miss the significance of why those details are there. This person that was texting me is just words on my phone, but I could feel the emotion. And I want you to come with me for a moment just to a night in the life of Jesus. It's his last night with this hand-picked leadership team, and he's about to share stuff with them. And I want you to feel the emotion of what's going on in the account in the Gospels. Now, Jesus is only hours away from being arrested and put to death. And Judas has already got up, he's left the room to go and betray Jesus. And Jesus announces to everyone else that's left behind that Peter's going to, in essence, do the same thing. He publicly tells everyone, Peter, you're going to deny me. You're going to walk away. And then in this conversation that's taking place, it gets to a place where Jesus says to Philip, one of the other disciples, he says this, don't you know me, Philip? Even after all we have been through such a long time, don't you know me? Can you hear the pain when Jesus is talking to Philip? Don't you know me? It's like he's saying, Phil, mate, we've been through so much together. We've done so much for 3.5 years. We've been on the road together. Like, Phil, I saved your life in that storm on Galilee. Don't you remember? Don't you remember when we fed the 5,000 and I asked you what it would cost to feed this number of people, and then you saw that miracle happen in your hands as you fed it out to people. And Phil, you helped pick up all those baskets of scraps left over at the end. Phil, we've been through so much. Don't you know me? Don't you know me? Have you ever thought how good it would be to actually have lived back then and to hear Jesus live, talking to the crowds, teaching the crowds, even to have a little window into when he answered the disciples' questions privately? How good would that have been to have seen Lazarus like tiptoe out of the grave and, hello folks, what are you upset about? I'm back again. Like, how good would that have been? And when you think of that, do you imagine that if you could have seen those things, it would have been so much easier to trust God with your life? If you could have seen those things and heard those things, how much easier would it be to know Jesus? Well, Peter experienced all of that and a whole lot more. And on the night when Jesus was arrested, it wasn't enough. He threw a man tantrum and swore and cursed and said he didn't know Jesus, and he went off into the darkness bitterly crying, walking away from Jesus. It wasn't enough. And people know that when Judas betrayed Jesus, he betrayed him with a kiss. But that's really not a big deal. It's not as significant as the words that Judas used when he betrayed Jesus. He went up to him and he kissed him on the cheek, but he called him Rabbi, which means teacher. It meant that he only saw Jesus as a teacher of God's word. He didn't know who he was. He had no clue, really, as to who he was betraying. And in this night when Jesus is talking to Peter about what he's going to do, and Judas has walked out, and he's talking to Philip about, do you not know me? He was also talking to Tom, because Thomas had began this asking Jesus questions because he was confused about what Jesus was talking about. Jesus was saying, I'm going to go away. I'm going to go to the Father. I'm going to prepare a home for you, and I'm going to come back. And these mozzies are coming back. I killed that one. Look at that. It's dead, 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 dead. And I feel better. Right, so Thomas says to Jesus in the middle of this night, this last night with the boys, he says, Jesus, we have no idea where you're going or how you're going. How are we to know the way? And that's when Jesus says these words. You might have heard them before. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to me, no one comes to the Father except through... What are you doing, Coral? Hello, gorgeous. Give me a hug. Come here. Oh, what a beautiful thing. What are you doing? Just my head. So sorry about that. Coral always wants a hug. She'll interrupt anything just to get a hug from me. So it's the stuff I've got to do, right? So anyway, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. And then he keeps talking. This is out of his mouth. The next words he says, if you really knew me. And he's talking to his disciples, to Philip. Don't you know me, Philip? If you really knew me, you would know the Father as well. And Jesus ends this conversation with this thought. He says, if you don't know my ways, if you don't really know me, he says, at least get to know me by what I do. This is what it actually says. It says, or at least believe on the evidence of the miracles themselves. It's wonderful to know God by what he does. That's fantastic. By what he says, what we know his will is. But how much better to know him by his ways. Moses prayed, teach me your ways that I may know you. David wrote in Psalm 103, says this, he made known his ways to Moses, his deeds, what he did, what he said to the people of Israel. The writer of Hebrews, he tells us that is not enough. Even after 40 years of seeing what God did, God in Hebrews says to us, it's not enough. Their hearts are always going astray, for they have not known my ways. Back in Sydney, when we started Open House Church, there was a family came one Sunday morning, and it was a big guy that had a 9-year-old daughter and his wife. He was in a car accident 2 years earlier, and as a result, he couldn't work. He could not drive a vehicle again. He could not move his arms properly, and he was in significant pain. And I made a deal with him. I said, every time you walk in this place, we're going to pray for you until God heals you. And he would come some mornings and he was in pain, and we would gather around him, and every time we prayed for him, the pain would go. But there was one morning, I'm preaching him a little hard out. I'm avoiding the mosquitoes, my wife coming up and hugging me. I'm staying focused. But then as I'm looking at him, he's in pain, like really bad pain. And I couldn't keep preaching. I just stopped and I said, can we get a few people gather around him? And they gathered around him and they started praying, and I got back into preaching. And then they sort of wandered out. They took him out to pray for him out the back room sort of thing. And so I'm back preaching again. And then I look up, and here he is at the back of everyone, and his arms are up above his head, and he's waving, he's jumping. I'm thinking, I'm never gonna finish this preaching bit. And I never did. Because God supernaturally healed him. And he came down the front, and I gave him the microphone, and he said, I haven't been able to be a dad to my 9-year-old for 2 years. I haven't been a husband to my wife, and God has healed me. And 2 weeks later, we got him to share to everyone what this new changed body was like. He said he decided if God had healed him, he should test drive this new body. So he did in 2 hours what was taking him 9 hours to do previously. He just did everything. And then he got his license back. And then he was able to go back to work, and he's working 5 days a week. And then because they'd been without money for 2 years because he couldn't work, now he's working 6 days. And now he's working 7 days. And now he stops coming to church. And he ends up walking away from God. And I asked myself, how is that possible? After this amazing supernatural miracle, what God has done in his life, how could he walk away from God completely? He only knew God by what he did. Now, please don't misunderstand me, right? We desperately need to know God through what he does. That's the way he's made us. It's the desire of our hearts. Why do you think movies with superheroes in them work? heroes with supernatural powers. Why do you think that works? Because we are wired to have a hero in our life that can do what we can't. And that's God. That's the way he made us. James, I love James, the brother of Jesus. He really he says it as it is, right? And James, he says this is in the NIV. He says, faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, it's dead. The Message Bible, it puts it this way, and I love this bit. It says, isn't it obvious that God talk without God acts is outrageous nonsense, right? We have to know God through what he does. And right now, I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask God to do something, because there are 3 people, I've spoken to them, I've asked them if it's okay to pray for them publicly. 3 people that need right now God to do something for them. One, it's Simon in Ghana. Simon has just lost his job because they told him he talks too much. Now, that's a hard life lesson. But right now, Simon doesn't have a job. And he can't buy the medicine for his eye. And so I'm going to pray for you, Simon. Lord, I ask right now that you would give Simon a job, that he can work, that he would learn from the mistakes of the past and he would grow, but you would give him a job, that he'd have a job. He wouldn't have to pay bribes to get a job, but you would give him a job. And he would be able to buy and pay for what he needs. The second person, Tony. Tony's got dental stuff going on, is booked in, needs to see a specialist, is in pain right now, but the specialist appointment is not for 2.5 weeks, and that's too far away. So God, I speak right now, your healing upon him, set him free from pain in the name of Jesus, free from pain. Either God set him free completely or bring the specialist appointment closer for him. Speak that now over his life. Third person is Bonnie. Bonnie has been to Redgum once, but we love her. And as a church, we've been helping her. Even yesterday, Mark was down mowing her lawns in Lakes Entrance. We love you, Bonnie. And right now, Bonnie's life is threatened through cancer, through brain cancer, cancer in her spine, issues in her lungs. And right now, there is nothing that's going to save her life but a supernatural miracle. So, Lord, right now, I speak freedom from pain, ability to breathe again. Like only 2 nights ago, Bonnie's heart stopped and she couldn't breathe for 2 minutes. She was in the hospital. It's a scary place to be when you can't breathe. And so, Lord, I speak your healing over Bonnie. Supernaturally set her free from pain, give her the ability to breathe, and heal her. Heal her, Lord. Heal her. I love stories about what God does. And they begin by what we just did then, by praying and asking God. And when we have stories to share of what God's done, it helps us, it builds our faith, it helps other people. I was coming back from Singapore and I was tired. It had been a big few days and I was jumping on that plane that comes back at night time. I just wanted a couple of empty seats around me. I could lie down, go to sleep and arrive back in Australia. I was so disappointed when I got on the plane. It's chockers. It's full of people and every seat's full. And I'm sitting beside this big bloke. He's a first-generation Lebanese Australian. He was an atheist but had a Catholic background. He was a scientist coming back from Germany. He's about 28 years of age. And I looked at this bloke that looked like a terrorist, right? I shouldn't have said that, whoops. But I looked at this bloke, right? And I'm thinking, I'm not going to talk to him. I had a book I wanted to read and then go to sleep. I'm not going to say anything to him. I made a terrible mistake. I said, "G'day." And we got talking. And he started telling me his life story. And then he started asking me questions about God. And for 7 hours, I was exhausted when I got on the plane. But 7 hours later, I was energized when I got off that plane. For 7 hours, I told him stories of what God had done in my life and in other people's lives. And as I'm getting off the plane, I had this book I was going to read called, I don't know, something about eternity, Driven by Eternity or something. And I offered to give him a book. I wanted to give him something that he could go on with in this discovering who God was. And he said, "No, I'm not interested in your book. No, don't worry about it, mate." And that was it. We walked away. But later I was downstairs getting on the train. I'm in the toilets and he comes up to me, same bloke. And he says, "I want to tell you why I didn't take your book." Because he says, "Your book will not change me." He said, "The only thing that will change me is meeting other Christians like you that have stories of what God has done." The Bible is just a book of stories. But if it's just a book of stories to you, that's not why God gave it to us only. It's also so that we can get to know through the stories God's ways. God's ways, his purposes, his heart, what he does, why he does it. It's his ways. That's the bigger picture of why we have this thing called the Bible. And it takes time to get to know God. It's like wisdom. It just because you've had a lot of life experience and you've lived a long time doesn't make you wise. The two don't have to go hand in hand. But to gain wisdom, you do need some life experience. To know God's ways, it takes time. Now, Friday night, Coral and I went to a gathering of pastors from the whole of Gippsland and Australian Christian churches for an end of year, just get together. It was great, really good at Sale. And while I was there, I got a text message from someone with this question: "Do you ever feel let down by God?" I wanted to say yes so that they could feel like I was relating to them. But I said no. And it's a hard question to answer in a text, especially because I'm not meant to be on my phone in this gathering. I'm meant to be talking to people, right? But so this was the text that I sent back to them. I'm just going to read it to you. No. And I'll explain why. I don't judge God by the circumstances because I know God. Not just through what he does, but through who he is. Up until my early 20s, when things went wrong in my life, I got so angry at God. I can remember going out in the paddock and just screaming, "God, why? I'm yelling. I'm upset with him. I'm angry at him." And every time something would go wrong in my life, I would get angry at God. But when I was in my early 20s, I forgave my dad for not being the dad that I wanted him to be. My dad loved me, but Dad would show his love by doing things for me. And I desperately wanted him to show his love to me by doing things with me. And it caused this fractured relationship. And in my early 20s, I can remember walking up to Dad and throwing my arms around him and crying and saying, "Dad, I forgive you. I forgive you for not being the dad I wanted you to be." And he cried and I cried, and it changed my life. Because I was looking at my Heavenly Father through this fuzzy lens that my earthly father and I, our relationship, how it worked. Now, Dad got to be my hero. Dad was God's greatest gift into my life, just this precious gift. I have loved my dad all his days, but I didn't back then. I was angry at him and I was angry at God. And I don't know your circumstances, but I think that some of you are stuck. You're stuck in just knowing God, and you're stuck because your relationship with God is got a shadow over it because of your biological father. Your biological father has robbed your family of happiness. He's hurt you. He's walked out on you, walked out on your mother, on your siblings. When Jesus was trying to teach us his ways about asking and seeking and knocking and not giving up, on keeping on coming back to him, he says this. He says, which of you fathers, if your son asks for a fish, will give him a snake instead? Or if he asks for an egg, we'll give him a scorpion, like Kinder Surprise, it's a scorpion. You thought it was a little egg, but nah, it's a scorpion, suffer boy. Like, this is what Jesus, the picture Jesus is painting. And then he says this, if you then, though you are evil, that's not very Christian for Jesus to call us evil, right? If you who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give to you? See, Jesus wasn't comparing a good dad and a good God, because he called even the best dads evil compared to this heavenly Father who will do so much more. Please don't get the words confused between earthly dad and heavenly dad. There's no comparison. Don't get stuck in this thing in your head, this shadow that casts over God. And if you find yourself, when things are going wrong, if you hear these words in your mind, in your thoughts, why me? What have I done? It's not fair. If you find the circumstances in your life are actually creating this distance between you and God, I think you're stuck in your relationship because it's based on knowing what he does and not understanding, knowing God's ways. There's this place we can come to where we get to know God's ways. It brings rest instead of anxiety and even torment. And you can be in that place as a Christian. Wherever you are, and I'll just finish with this, wherever you are in your relationship with God, whether it's the very beginning or if you've been trusting him for a long time, wherever you are, part of your story is what he's done. But knowing his ways is the difference between living in a house you rent or owning a home debt-free. Moses prayed, teach me your ways so I may know you. And God answered. This is his answer. He says, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. Moses was not looking for rest. He was just looking for a house to rent, a roof over his head. But God gave him a home that he could own. I'm just going to pray. Lord, I thank you. I thank you that we can know you through what you do. But how much better to know you through your ways, through your character, through why you do what you do, why you are so much, your ways higher than our ways, your thoughts higher than ours. I thank you that you can bring us into that understanding and it sets us free from so much stuff. I thank you for that. Next week, I'm going to keep building this. There's so much in this, and I'm looking forward to making it really practical and showing you how you can know God's ways. So next week, I don't know. We'll decide where we'll be, what we're doing. We'll let you know. We'll catch you next time. See ya.